Welcome to Seasoned Liberally. My name is Cecil. Today we are going to be making rillettes. Rillettes is this really wonderful slow-cooked pork that is eventually turned into like a pate with some of the reserved fat on top. It's a really great spread for bread, and it's just absolutely a wonderful dish to have if you're having people over, because you can make it well in advance, and then you can sort of create a little charcuterie board, and that could be the main component of that board, and it is absolutely marvelous. So rillettes is a real simple recipe to make. And again, this is more of a guideline than anything else. So rillettes is traditionally a mild dish, and that's sort of where I'm staying today with the flavorings, but you can take it in any direction that you like. First thing you're going to want to do is get your oven preheated to 250 degrees Fahrenheit convection, or about 275 conventional oven. We have right now all of our ingredients here, and this is a piece of pork shoulder that we're going to be cutting up into smaller pieces. So you want a nice big piece of pork shoulder that has a nice big bunch of fat on it. You want to, this fat's going to be important in the recipe, and this is about 2.5 pounds worth. This is going to make a goodly amount of this stuff, so you don't want to get, like a 4 or 5 pound piece of boneless pork here. But there's no bone in here, and there's like I say, a nice big bunch of beautiful fat on top, and we're going to reserve and keep all of this. So we need to butcher it and cut it into smallish chunks, because you can either turn this into a really fine pate, or you can leave it as sort of a shredded pate, shredded pork pate. I'm going to be making mine more shredded than I am going to be making it fine, but you're still going to want to cut it into smaller pieces even for that. So I'm just going to cut this into smallish cubes. Helps to have a really sharp knife for this. And if you do run into any bones, be sure to cut them out, because one of the things you don't want to do is be spreading this onto some bread or something like that, and then wind up with like a bone or something, or a chip of bone. And I just found a bone in here, so I'm pulling that bone out. Sometimes the butcher can be a little sloppy and leave little pieces in there. And like I said, I'm just cubing this into about 1-inch cubes, because it's going to be a lot easier when this is all said and done if this is actually in smaller pieces when we start out. It's going to cook more evenly too. All right. So our pork is cut up nicely in nice chunks. For this recipe, we are also going to have 4 sprigs at a time, and a couple of these are a little bigger. They're a little chunkier than 4, so there might be a little more than 4 in here. I think there's about 7. And then I'm going to have a couple of sprigs of rosemary in there. I have about 4 bay leaves, and then a few little seeds of coriander, maybe about 8 or so, and then about 20 or so peppercorns that I'm going to put in here. I have 2 nice big large shallots that I'm going to be using, and these again, as well as the garlic here, I'm using 4 cloves of garlic. These are not going to be cut or diced very much at all. They don't need to be, and they're going to actually be easier to fish out if I don't dice them up and I don't cut them up too small. Everything here I want to try to pull out if I can, because I really only want, at the very end, when I finish cooking this, I really only want the meat and I want the fat. So for the fat today, I'm using duck fat. Now, duck fat's pretty easy to find at a lot of different, like your butcher may carry it. I got mine at Whole Foods. Duck fat is absolutely beautiful. And with keto, the keto craze that's sort of going on right now, duck fat is easier to find than it used to be. Duck fat is beautiful. It's white. It's got this really lovely neutral flavor, but it's very, very rich. I love duck fat for this, but you could use essentially any fat that you like. You can use lard and just make sure that it's rendered down a little before you put it in, or you can use oils. You can use either a neutral oil like a canola oil, or you can even use a flavored oil like an olive oil. So we're just going to take the skin and kind of slightly smash these garlic cloves. That's the first thing we're going to do. So we're just going to take the skin off, discard the skin, and save the clove. And I am just using the side of my knife here and making sure that the knife is angled down so I'm not going to cut myself. And I just tap it once or twice and the skin pops right off. Now I don't want to crush these or smash these much more than I already have, because again, I want them to be easily fished out at the very end when I'm finally done. These, like I say, these are going to stay pretty much whole, and I just wanted to get the skin off of them. I'm going to do the same thing here with these shallots. I'm just going to sort of pull the skin off of these, and then I'm going to quarter them, cut them into, I'm going to cut essentially this big shallot into quarters, and that's it. I'm not going to dice these down or anything. So our shallots are done. So that's really all the prep that I need. I don't have to do a ton of prep here, and I'm not going to do anything with the herbs or with the peppercorns. So what I want to do is I want to put all the pork in sort of a layer on the bottom, as much as I can in a nice layer. And now I'm going to cover the rest of this with the pork, but I want to sort of nestle in all of my aromatics and now I'm going to put the rest of this meat on top. And I want it to be kind of packed down a little because it's all going to be cooking and it's all going to be rendering, and I want to make sure that as much of it that I can submerge into this duck fat, I want as much of this as possible submerged in that. So let me wash my hands real quick. So now this is going to need a little bit of salt. We're going to salt the final dish at the end once it's done, and once we shred it, and once we sort of toss it with some of the fat, we're going to salt it again to make sure that we got the right salt content. But before that even happens, I'm going to cook it with some salt too. So I'm not using a ton of salt on here. I would normally salt this pretty generously if I was cooking anything else, like a braise or something like that, but I just want to make sure that I don't put in too much, because a lot of these flavors are going to condense and a lot of the size of this is going to condense, and I don't want it to be too salty when it comes off. So let me add my duck fat now. Now I'm going to be adding about between 1/2 and 3/4 of a cup of duck fat. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and sort of nestle my herbs in here, tucking them down. So as this renders, this is going to wind up covering up all of these herbs and these spices, and it's really going to meld all the flavors together. So this covers for this is a little bit loose for me. I'm not crazy about it. I am going to put a little bit of aluminum foil on here to make more like a tighter seal, and then I'll actually weight it down with the lid. So nice tight seal on there, and then I'm just going to weight it down with the lid. And now it's a real nice tight seal. This is gonna cook for about 3 hours in that low oven, that 250-degree oven. This has been in a low oven for 3 hours. And I am going to actually just let it sit here. I'm not gonna take anything off. I'm just gonna let this sit on the counter. It's on a trivet so that there's some good airflow that can get all around it. And I'm gonna let it sit here for about a half an hour. There's really no reason for me to break this open and dig into here when it's nice and piping hot. There's really no reason. And actually what'll happen is the meat that's inside of there will absorb some of that fat, and it will also get solid. So when I pull it out, it'll be easy to separate it from all the other matter that I want to get rid of. And it shouldn't be an issue once it comes basically to room temperature. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to let it sit here for 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and then we'll deal with it. So we let this cool to room temperature. It's still a little warm, but it's definitely cool right now. So we're going to open it up. And as you can see, we have beautiful, fully cooked, wonderful pork in here. And we've got to separate this now. That's the key, because in here I can see that there's clearly still some of these pieces of vegetable matter that we've got to get out of there, and all of the shallot and the garlic, because that's already spent all of its flavor. So I'm gonna go through here and start picking stuff out with tongs first, and then I'm gonna try to reserve as much of this liquid as I can. And I'm trying to make sure I get all of this vegetable matter out of here as much as possible, because the texture on this is gonna be really pretty terrible, and I wanna make sure I get as much as I possibly can out of this, so that if there is any left, if any of it is still left in here, it'll be so minimal that you won't actually like taste it, or it won't actually it won't be a texture that you feel. So now as I pull this out and put it into this strainer, I'm still looking at it as I pull it out, so that there isn't like a piece of shallot or something that came off. Okay, so now what's left in here is, little pieces of what would have been, I guess, the sort of connective tissue that's in here. There's little pieces of that. There's also little tiny bits of onions still left in here, and all the peppercorns that are in here. So what I want to do is I want to strain it, because this liquid is what we're going to use to seal the top of this. When we shred this, we're going to put it in the bottom of a jar, and then we're going to pour this fatty liquid on it. And when this fatty liquid gets cold, it'll essentially seal the top of the jar. And this is sort of an ancient preserving technique, something that they would have used in northern countries for many, many centuries to try to preserve the food. It would last for a long time, and it'll last for a while in your fridge. 2 months, up to 2 months it'll last in your fridge if it has a good seal on it. And so we're going to separate it out into almost little serving sizes, and then cover this on the top. But what we don't want is it to be full of stuff. What we want is it to be sort of a liquid, so that when it does pour on top, it will have a nice seal. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is pull this liquid out of here. All right, so here we go. We're going to pour it in, and you can see this is mostly fat. That's all the rendered fat that was rendered off of this meat. Then it's also the duck fat too. So now what we have here is I've skimmed as much of the oil off the liquid. I let it sit for a while, right? Let it sit at room temperature for 15 minutes or so. It's going to separate. And then I went through and I took a spoon and I got rid of I took all the fat and I put it in here. So the fat is all in here. And then I poured the rest of the liquid, which included some fat, as you could see, back into this bowl, right? I do want to reserve some of that liquid, because the liquid is going to give that sort of moistness to the pate. So the best way I found to do this, there's a couple of different ways that you can turn this into pate. One way is to put it in your KitchenAid mixer with a paddle attachment and just spin it until it turns white. It'll get down into very, very tiny fibrous materials, and it'll look white. At that point, then you could just lay it into your jars, ladle a little fat over the top, and then it'll be fine. It'll be ready to go. But I like mine a little more coarse. So what I'm going to use is the trusty old masher, and I'm going to mash it instead using this masher. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to try to smash it down and get as much of this. So it's going to start to incorporate all the liquid that's in the bottom. Now this is juice. That was the cooking liquid. And what we're trying to do is just incorporate as much of that as possible back into the meat. And we're trying to break up, especially the fatty parts of this, so that someone doesn't come in and take a bite and get a big chunk of fat. We want to make sure that everything is sort of distributed evenly. So now, as I pick through here, I can see that there was 2 or 3 peppercorns. I want to get rid of those if I can. Because one thing you do not want is somebody to be biting through this and take a bite out of peppercorn. That's not going to be great. This is our opportunity now to season. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put a little salt in. I know for sure it needs salt. I just tasted it. I'm going to put in a little more and give it a stir. Just the tiniest bit more, and it'll be ready to go. So 2 things you have to understand. One is that there's not a lot of seasoning in the fat, so when we do put a little bit of fat on top to seal it off, when we mix it, when it's at room temperature later, that blandness is going to come back in. So you want this, when you taste it, to taste a touch salty. Not a lot, but there's going to be, a 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch of fat on it when we seal it away. So be careful to make sure that it's gonna be seasoned correctly for including that fat. The other thing is that when you serve this, you want it to be room temperature, and that's where it is right now. The colder it is, the more muted the flavors will be. So understand that if you serve it more cold than it is right now, it might be a little under seasoned. So I'm going to taste it one more time. That's the perfect amount of seasoning. So now we have our pork and we have our fat, and we are going to put it in jars. And when I do, I'm going to press it down around the edge, like so. Now, if you don't have a jar like this, you can put it in a Tupperware container. That's perfectly fine. Anything with a sealable lid will work. You can also, if you want, put it in a ramekin and then really, really tightly wrap it. That will work as well. I think these glass jars are kind of adorable, so I'm putting it in these glass jars. But you can certainly put it into something else that can seal tightly. When you finish this process and you have all of the meat pate inside of these jars or inside of whatever vessel you have, we're going to then put a seal of fat on top. And that is going to seal it off and protect it for up to 2 months in your refrigerator. So these last quite a long time. And the best part about it is that you can break into them, 6-8 weeks later after the fact, and you have a really tasty, wonderful pate that's absolutely fine 2 months after you've made it. So you can make enough to last you for like almost a whole winter. So now this is starting to get a little thick. You can see it's starting to get a little thick. I am going to ladle a little bit on each one to seal it up. So rillettes is a old French word for strip of pork. It's plural. And that is what we created, tiny little strips of pork. And I cannot tell you how quickly these go when you have friends over and when you're entertaining. People will come up and taste it it's not the most beautiful thing, and they'll look at it and they'll wonder what it is, and the adventurous amongst your friends will taste it first, and then when they have a giant smile across their face and they can't stop eating it, the unadventurous among your friends will come over and taste it, and everybody's going to wind up happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close these up, and now my suggestion is put these in your refrigerator, let them sit until it's about maybe 2 hours to serve, take it out, and let it come to room temperature. So our pork rillettes have been in the fridge. I took some out a while ago. It is at room temperature, but as you can see, even at room temperature, this fat is almost solid. Admittedly, I keep it relatively cold in here, so it's about 68 degrees in here right now. So butter would not be, butter would actually be a little hard to cut in here right now. But as you can see, this is definitely, you could see that the top is not 100% solid. Now, like I said earlier, you can mix this all up, or you can let your guests decide, or your loved ones decide exactly how much fat they would like to have. They could even scrape some of the fat off if they like. I like to serve this rillettes with something sour, something that can take a little bit of that fat flavor and mellow it out with a little bit of acid. Great additions to this are a nice coarse ground mustard, or little cornichons, or sour pickles. Those are really great to have alongside of this, so that someone can take a little bit of rillettes, taste it, and then if they want to add a little bit of mustard to the top of it or on the bottom of it, or if they want to just eat a pickle afterwards, it's available for them. So it's really nice to have. So I'm going to give this a shot. This has been, like I said, sitting for a little while in the fridge, and then I just popped it out a while ago to come to room temperature. So as you can see, it's pate, fibrous here, and I'm going to spread a little on this piece of bread. That duck fat is really good. I will say that is so rich. I might put a little bit of mustard on it to even start out, because it's just so rich. And it's nice to cut with a little bit of mustard. I'm gonna try one more bite. That could be the perfect pate experience. It's so rich. There's so much richness there. And what's so great about this is that one little jar of this could really satiate a whole crowd of people, because it's just so rich, and there's so much richness here. That duck fat adds such another level of fat and richness to this. And then the meat, of course, you're getting all of the flavor compounds that you put into the meat, the shallot and the garlic and all the different seasonings that we put in there. You can taste it all. There's a little, notes of rosemary, notes of thyme, a little bit of pepper in the back. It's really, really just a wonderful mellow flavor. And of course, the pork, the higher quality pork you get, the better it's going to be. And the pork in this is perfect. It's wonderful. It's got a really, really great flavor to it. I can't recommend this as an addition to your charcuterie enough. I think it's really a wonderful thing to have around, and to just, you make it every couple of months and have 3 or 4 jars of it in your fridge, and you can pull it out as you have people over, as we hopefully start to have people over in the future. But it's really a wonderful dish. I hope you make it. So I want to wish you happy holidays. I hope you enjoy this with your loved ones this year, and maybe next year around New Year's Eve, you'll be able to enjoy this with your friends, family, people that you have over. I hope that you enjoy this channel, and if you do, please let me know in the comments below, and please like and share. It really helps me understand sort of what people are looking for. When you comment on different things, I can respond if you have questions. And it also, if you have suggestions, that's another great place to put them, is just in the comments to suggest things that I might want to make in the future. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoy this recipe. And if you do try it, please let me know how it turned out.